All right, so let's talk about instruction and some of the expectations. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is lesson plans. And yes, you are going to turn in your lesson plans every week. The expectation is that you turn your lesson plans in by Sunday at midnight. There is a Google Classroom on your opening checklist. If you will join that Google Classroom, you will start to see assignments populate. The first one will be there. It says quarter one, week one. It will just say that it is assignment that's due. Now, listen, I know that everybody does lesson planning differently, and I am okay with that. My beginning teachers, there are specific processes and procedures that you have to follow as a beginning teacher, and that is to use the Granville County lesson planning template, which is also in our portal if that's something you're interested in. My BTs have to use that. My other teachers, it's up to you. Some teachers want to write their lesson plans on a post it note or a napkin, and that is perfectly fine. Snap a picture and upload it into the Google Classroom. If I have concerns or one of my administrators has concerns, we are going to let you know, talk to you about it, and figure out how we can get more information when it's necessary. So, honestly, it's just a way for us to cross reference, to check as we're coming in, doing walkthroughs, checking in to see what's happening, where we're at. We'll use this during PLCs and talk more about that later as well. So I just wanted you to see the Google Classroom and know kind of where that is and how we will utilize and expect lesson plans to be submitted. The next week's submission is always opened on Mondays at 8 a.m. So, the next thing within our handbook that we're looking at is board setup. So, one thing that I have found to be particularly important is consistency, specifically for middle school students. So, if every classroom is set up identical, students know where to look, what to expect, and how to be prepared. So, I am going to expect that our classrooms have a similar board setup in one location within your classroom. On that board is the basics, nothing super over the top, but I want everybody to have their date, an up to date date, so students know what the day is, the standard that they're learning, the learning target for the day, that is the daily goal. Today, I need you to be able to walk out of here and know this, or answer this question, or be able to do this. That is that learning target. Make it specific for the day. I can leave here knowing, being able to do, or answering this question. And then an agenda. It can be your I do, we do, you do. It can be number one, two, three, four, whatever your agenda items are for the day, so students know what to expect as they progress. That is something that's it. The date, the standard, the goal for the day, and a quick brief overview of an agenda. Same place every single day, so kids know where to look and reference it. Use that as kind of what you do to start your class, so kids know where it's at and how they can get going. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is gradings, because we are going to make sure that we are consistent with grading within our school and following the Granville County expectations here. So, setting up your grade book, there are two categories that will be in there with the exception of my Math 1 classes. The two categories that are going to be within your grade book are going to be your major assignments, which count 40%. That's your big stuff. And your minor assignments, which count 60%. Those are basically everything else, anything you want to put in the grade book. Big thing to think about here are your expectations for grading. So you should have one grade a week going into your grade book. I'm going to look for that and expect that. I do have a grade book report pulled every Monday so I can monitor and make sure that grades are going in. It's a great way to communicate with families and make sure that they're staying up to date with how students are performing. It also is really important for students to know how grades are impacting their overall performance. When students have that zero go in the grade book and see how much it impacts their grade, a lot of times they're more likely to make an impact or change their performance in your class. A couple things, district-wide expectations. You have to have a minimum of 10 minor assignments in the grade book and 4 major assignments. Again, that matches the expectation for one minor assignment every single week in the grade book, and then about every other week doing a major assessment or assignment, depending on what that is. Next thing is makeup work. So, with makeup work, we have a district policy that I want to make sure I hit very, very, very hard, because it is going to be a change and something we're going to have to be super intentional about. So in the last video, you heard a lot about attendance and the importance of attendance and notes and how that makes a difference in what Miss Parrott's expectations are for attendance notes. The reason that's so important, if a student has an unexcused absence, they do not get to make up the assignment. It is a zero and the zero stands. Okay, so if a student has an unexcused absence in the gradebook, they do not make up the work for that day. If you have a test that day, they do not make up the assignment. If a student has an excused absence, they have 3 days to make up the work. And they have to have turned in their note within that 3-day period. So they can't just turn a note in 2 weeks later and it becomes excused. It doesn't matter at that point. So if a student has an excused absence, they have to have turned the note in and they get 3 days within that 3 day of their absence with no penalty. I know that's a little confusing. We'll talk about that more in PLC. We'll talk about that more during our grade level, and we will talk about that throughout the first quarter as this is something we will begin adapting to and adjusting. The next thing is our late work policy. This is tweaked just a little bit. I've had some conversations with different staff members and looked at our district policy and feel confident that this is a process and procedure school-wide that we can implement. So it's important students have an opportunity to turn assignments in because at the end of the day, we want them to do the work. But reality is they have to have a consequence for turning something in late. They can't get full credit. So if they turn assignments in late, it's going to be an immediate deduction of 20 points. So the max they can get on a late assignment is going to be an 80. And that'll be within the first 2 weeks of an assignment being late. They can earn up to an 80. After that 2 weeks, they can earn up to a 60. But that only will be counted as long as you're within that unit. So if you are teaching fractions, multiplying fractions, and you are getting ready to give your unit test on multiplying fractions, once you give that unit test, all work for that unit has to be turned in because turning it in late beyond that point isn't going to do the student as much good. Again, we'll talk about that in PLCs and we'll talk about that in grade level to make sure we have a good understanding, but just make sure you're talking to your team, you're talking to your PLC so that you're all on the same page with what that expectation is. Next thing I want to talk about is our grade recovery expectations. If you give a test or a big project or something that's a major grade, kids need to have an opportunity to grade recover. That means they need to have an opportunity, a second chance to improve their grade. I don't expect you to give them full credit. That would not be fair. That would not make the most sense. But they should get a few points. Example, if you give a test and want to allow test corrections, having a strict expectation about how you do that, but allowing them to get some credit back for test corrections. Maybe you want to do a remediation where they have to sit, they have to review, and then they get an opportunity to retest. That's up to your PLC how you want that to look, but I want kids to have that opportunity. All right, the next thing I want to look at is our substitutes, and this is specific to you as teachers. So when you are out, because it happens, we're human and we have leave and we deserve to have days off too. There are specific expectations that I want you to follow when you have a absence. So as a staff, please make sure that you notify 3 different people. You put it in timekeeper. That is required for any employee in our building. That is, if you don't know how to do that, see Miss Harrington. She will help you out. If you have a class, you teach an actual class, you need to put it in Red Rover. That means you need a substitute, okay? So Red Rover is our system that will sign you up to a substitute. And then you need to email our admin team. So make sure that you let our admin team know. Make sure you let your bookkeeper know, which is Miss Harrington. And then make sure you let your team lead know as well. So an email to all of those people is sufficient. That way we know what's going on and that we can be available and support. If you have a request submitted in Timekeeper in advance, please go ahead and put them in if you know you have doctor's appointments coming up, because I have to formally approve those in Timekeeper, and that will make sure that you get that approval ahead of time. We'll talk about that for personal leave in just a second. Super important. So emergencies happen. That is normal. I don't want to say it happens all the time because we don't want emergencies, but it does happen. So text, call your grade level admin, me, make sure we know what's going on and let your team lead know so that we can make sure we pull your emergency plans, which we'll talk about. There are a couple types of leave. Sick leave, first and foremost. A doctor note can be requested at any time. Um, I can ask for that doctor's note, but I will be requiring a doctor's note if you have 3 consecutive absences. So if you're out Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, on Wednesday I'm going to ask for a doctor's note, and that's just policies so that we can follow. And up to principal discretion at what point that is going to happen. So for our building, it's going to be 3 consecutive days. Personal leave. You have to have a 5-day advance approval from me if you want to use personal leave. So put it in Timekeeper and send me an email that you've submitted it, or come see me. Let's talk so I know what's going on and why you're requesting it. You don't have to give me the details, but that way I know you've put in a personal leave request so that I can try and grant that and approve that. If you don't put it in within 5 days, it can be denied, and therefore you would have to take leave without pay, which can be a penalty in your NESIS evaluation or at the district level. But also, if you don't put it in within 5 days and get that approval, you'll have to pay additional fees towards your sub. Leave before or after a break or holiday. This is super important. Anytime you're going to take leave before or after a holiday, you will have to require a doctor's note to be turned in with that leave request. And then leave without pay. It's not really an option. I know that that is something we talk about, and people think, oh, I can just take a day without pay. It's not a big deal. It is very much a big deal, because that is neglecting your job responsibilities without appropriate leave, and can be documented through NESIS under your leadership standard 1, or it can also be documented through HR and county office, and that is not something we want to happen. Please know, my beginning teachers, my young teachers that may not have a lot of leave, that may happen with annual leave, and that is something very specific and unique that we will talk about, leave without pay. But what I'm talking about here is somebody that just decides to take a day that doesn't have any leave and just chooses to take off. There are a couple other specific leave options. Please see me or Miss Harrington if you have something going on, so we can talk to you about those. So in your sub plans, please make sure, if you're going to be out, that you have a organized setup for your substitute. Please include your schedule, your personal daily schedule for the sub to follow. Make sure you have a roster for each of your class, a seating chart for your class, and make sure you include health plans, not necessarily everything about the kid, but make sure that the teacher knows if a student is diabetic and may have to go to the nurse. So that's a safety responsibility. We want to make sure that person knows. Make sure that your substitute knows who your team lead is so they can contact them if they have questions. Make sure they know how to contact the front office if they need anything. If you have afternoon duty during that leave, make sure they know what they need to do and how they need to do it, or tag in a teammate to take that responsibility. And make sure they know the daily procedures that students should be following. Also, make sure you leave detailed explanation of your specific emergency expectations and procedures for your classes. Please make sure you have your plans, make sure they will last the full class period, and make sure they are on paper. Substitutes are not allowed to use technology at all, which Ms. Smith talks about in a video. At all, technology is not allowed with a substitute. Emergency subplans are the exact same. You need to see me. I have your emergency subfolder. It is blue. It has your name on the top, and you need to have 3 days of lesson plans in there. Don't make the copies. We just need a master copy of assignments, and then the office staff will run those. In the event that you are out and need to pull your emergency subplans, we will make the copies and get everything set up. But in that emergency subfolder, you need to have all the things we just talked about: your rosters, your seating charts, your emergency operations of how your class runs, daily procedures, team lead contact, anything you put with your subplans, put in your emergency folder as.